Initial Thoughts is a spoiler-free movie review series. All opinions are my own.
Hello, and welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and... I'm not doing that voice the whole time. Welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and when they are released. Today's film we're talking about is Saw X, which is directed by Kevin Grutart and stars Tobin Bell and Shawnee Smith. Now, the Saw franchise. Let's talk about Saw as a whole. The first Saw film, all the way back in 2004, is one of my top 10 favourite horror films of all time. Is it the most effectively scary or horrific? No. When it comes to that kind of genre, things like Hereditary and Sinister, what I would always say, are far superior when it comes to scares. But as effective storytelling and brutality in the sense of the scenario that the characters are put in, the first Saw film stands so high on my totem pole for horror films and just in films in general. It's one of my all-time favourites. And then after that, with the second installment, Saw 2, I actually really enjoy as well. The one with Donnie Wahlberg in it, and it's not as good, but it certainly expands on the scenario and kind of brings it to a bigger scale. And it's kind of the building blocks of why it becomes such a big franchise. However, it becoming a franchise kind of... okay. I really love the first film. I really enjoy the second film. Third film is okay. And we just become a gradual decrease in quality as time goes. All the way up to like Saw 3D, which is just... by that point you've got the character of Hoffman, the Detective Hoffman, who is like the Terminator by that point. And the franchise has certainly lost its way. Convoluted plot lines and story arcs that don't really go anywhere. If they do go somewhere, they're not really worthwhile, or they don't really pay off to the point of certainly the storytelling of the earlier Saw movies. And then since then, you know, it was Saw the final chapter. That was what it's billed. I think that was the 7th film. And then after that we had Jigsaw, which was kind of like somewhat of an origin story, but really was just an excuse to have another Saw film, and it was fine. We had Spiral, which was actually the first film I saw back after the cinemas were closed there for a while, and it was the first initial thoughts from an actual cinema movie, which was good fun and enjoyable in that regard. But if you remember that review, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. I thought it was fine, and I thought it was better than a lot of the previous Saw films, not including the first few. And that was where we're at. Our last outing was Chris Rock's Spiral, and that was the Saw franchise. And then, I heard about a year ago, as you probably did yourselves, that we're getting a 10th film. And it was Tobin Bell coming back as the main character in the kind of like a celebration film. You know, the 10th film should be a celebration of the franchise, and not many franchises get to that level. Certainly horror franchises. So now the ultimate question, was Saw X a worthy installment of the Saw franchise that had kind of lost its way for a good while now? Bar these, you know, kind of side plots that kind of tie in with Spiral, with Jigsaw, and then the overarching story losing its way, certainly from the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th film. Did I really enjoy Saw X, or was it more of the convoluted mess that it had kind of become for the main storyline? I have to say, I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed Saw X, as I would class myself a fan of the franchise. I certainly acknowledge its flaws, as I have done already. We've talked about it there a minute ago, which is the good and the bad. Certainly a staple of horror around that time, the early 2000s, for the first film. Then the franchise is born, and then as it goes, it loses way. But for it to now really... Saw X is definitely one of the best. Is it the best Saw film? I don't think so. But I did have, certainly by kind of the third act, I was thinking to myself, am I enjoying this more than the first film? And in the end, not that the last act doesn't land, because it really does. The whole film as a whole is really enjoyable. And going into this is probably as good as I could have hoped it to be. I was quite blown away in what they were able to do, because by this point, let's be honest,
If you watched more than one of the Saw franchise films, you know what to expect. You know you're going to go in, you're going to get a generic set of characters, they're going to get put in different variations of traps that lead to mutilations or anything brutal, and they're all just going to get picked off eventually, and then there's a bit of a twist, and that's the movie over. That was Saw. That's what Saw had become. And getting less and less effective as time has gone. Saw X had some of the most brutal moments. I've seen some articles saying that there were cinemas handing out sick bags for this movie, which I don't know that it's to that level, but there is certainly some moments in this where it really is some of the most brutal moments of the franchise, and that's saying something for something that has been such a staple of torture in movies, and kind of like the poster child for that genre, that subgenre of like torture porn that kind of brewed from this. I think that the brutality is certainly there. If you're going in just to see people get mangled, you're going to get that. You're going to get that in abundance. And you will not be disappointed in that regard. But here's the surprising part. And this is the part that I did not think I was going to get. Saw X is the best story of the franchise. It's the most... and I use this word lightly. It's the most justified the characters have been in the scenario. You can understand all motivation. From Jigsaw's side, from the people in Trap's side, everything. You can understand. And that's conveyed so well by how this is written and how it's directed. And also how it's acted. I mean, let's talk about Tobin Bell. Tobin Bell with arguably the most iconic voice in horror, or certainly top 3. He plays the lead role here, and he is... I really thought, and I don't know why I thought this, but I always thought he was a bit of a one-trick pony. He has the voice, but as an actor, he was just kind of there and was just fine. There wasn't much to him as an actor. Certainly, there wasn't much acting chops being shown in these movies, in any of his appearances, from the early movies, or even his returning appearances in later movies. He really... It comes across his care and love for the character, and for the story, and for the overarching story of the summary of the Saw franchise as a whole. And that really came across to me as an audience member watching this, and someone who's really enjoyed being along for the ride for the Saw franchise. And again, acknowledging it's good and acknowledging it's bad. I thought this was a great cinema trip. Now, let's start by saying, if you're a bit squeamish, this is not for you. If you like your horror movies, but you don't like blood, or you don't like people getting in nasty situations, let's say, it maybe isn't for you. But I would guess by the 10th Saw film, you know what a Saw film is about. Let's be real. But if you're coming into this and you're kind of hoping, like I was, I really like some of the earlier ones, but it's been so bad for so long. Well, that's not fair, because some of the other ones were okay. As I say, Jigsaw and Spiral, them separate films, were okay. As I say, Spiral was fine. I quite enjoyed it. And truth be told, it's probably like the 4th or 5th best of the 10. But this is definitely the second, maybe joint second best film for me in the franchise. And that does surprise me. I thought we wouldn't get much quality in this. But looking at, and even at other points, you know, and I do want to hang on that point because of the characteristics of the characters in this. There isn't a bit of it that isn't valid. And usually, for these movies, there's really hateable characters that are just awkward for awkward's sake, or stupid, or their motivations aren't clear, or it's a bit convoluted, and it's kind of... They just act that way to fit the plot. That doesn't come across in this. Every character acts the way they should act, based on what you know about them. And what it does set up early in the movie... Because the first act is about a 45 minutes about Tobin Bell basically going on a retreat to try and get himself cured. there isn't a lot of... There's a little sliver at the start to kind of whet the appetite, if you like. And maybe the wrong terminology, but that's... Bar that, a lot of the movie, it kind of lulls you into a false sense of security going, oh, well, we're okay. We're okay. There's no reason for him to kill anybody or start doing what he does. Or putting these people in these traps to try and, prove his point. Isn't that's the overarching thing about Jigsaw? He's trying to give people the opportunity to survive, but he doesn't kill anybody in his own mind, which I don't know how much I buy into that, let's be real. But I just thought it was so different, but it was so much better for it. It really shocked me how much they deviated from the norm, and it really needed that. And also in Shawnee Smith playing Amanda, who is, of course, if you've been following the franchise, one of the more recurring characters. She appeared in the first film, in the second, and has kind of been in a bit part to major role throughout the entirety of the franchise. She also was really good, and this is maybe one of her best outings, bar the first film. Or maybe the second film. She really... She's like an alumni of Saw. She's probably the second most recognisable character in this behind Jigsaw himself. So for her to come back, that brought and made me feel like the people making this movie clearly had a care for the product they were making. And I know I harping on about that sometimes when I'm talking about movies like this, franchises that lose their way, but they get someone to come back in and really bring a bit of heart back. And it's weird to say that for a Saw movie of all things, because horror movies by default become very generic, especially when they come out every year. We've had so many things like Insidious, where it became a franchise, and bar the last movie I talked about not that long ago, which I quite surprisingly enjoyed, it became just every other year we had another Insidious movie and it was generic. Paranormal Activity is one of the best examples, where it was just... The first one was a good notion, it was a good idea, and they made a lot of money from it for such a basic idea and premise, but then just got to the point where it was, let's put out anything each Halloween, and people still go and see it because it has that name attached. And annoyingly, that's what Saw became. And actually, Saw might be one of the franchises that is one of the most recognisable for that. That it just became, well, we have to have a Saw movie every year, so just do one. Just make one, and that's it. Don't put any care into it. Just make some traps. People get killed. People get brutally, and then they go home. There's not much care about it. And I just didn't feel that with Saw X, and that's as much as I hoped I want. I really was hoping and praying I would get something that broke the norm for Saw X, and it did. It did. I'm just very happy that this series that I really enjoy got a good ending, and I say that with a question mark because it felt very much like a final chapter and like a celebration of the franchise as a whole. Whether that is the case, whether this is kind of a starting point to start again, if you like, and build on this and keep going, I don't know. And I was kind of torn when I came out of the cinema tonight watching it. Did I want more from this, or did I want that to be the send-off? Did I want that to be the celebration of the franchise and be the kind of bookend of this? I don't know where I stand. If they made another one and it was with the similar people that made this and the same care, I would be interested. But I also think I'd be happy to say Saw X is the end of Saw. And it would be a good end, and it would be good to end it on a good note before it inevitably just keeps going and becomes stale again, like it did in the middle of the franchise, and certainly the last kind of few movies. I thought Saw was great. I thought Saw 2 was great. I thought some of the ones in the middle were just silly and stupid and generic by that point. And I thought Saw X was a real surprise, and a happy surprise. And again, it might not be your kind of thing, Saw as a franchise. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it is surprisingly enjoyable. And I think a lot of the qualities that I enjoyed about the first film back then, which was it was the shock of, okay, well, it's the one where the guy chops his ankle off or whatever, and it's like, oh my god, that's brutal, blah, blah, blah. But it was more than that. And I got a bit of the same feeling with this, actually quite a lot of the same feeling, that yes, it does have the brutal traps, and we expect that. But everything else, the story being told, the characters, the character moments, they were all so good in this. And that was just great. I really enjoyed Saw X. I really didn't think I would. Let's get to rate time. Let's go. Because it seems like IMDb's feeling on a similar kind of vibe as I am. And because usually horror movies go onto IMDb and the early response is usually awful. No matter even if horror films are good, most horror films don't get higher ratings. But I'm going higher than IMDb has given it. I'm giving Saw X an 8 out of 10. I did not think that would be the case. Saw X is one of my favourite horror movies I've seen this year. And I say horror movies, very different to some of the horror movies I've seen. Some of the movies I've enjoyed this year, things like Evil Dead Rise, things like Insidious Chapter 5, which I know people didn't really enjoy. I enjoyed a lot more than people seem to have, the general consensus was. And with a few more horror movies coming in the next month up to Halloween. But Saw X might be my favourite of the bunch. Or certainly up there with my favourite horror film of 2023. And truth be told, when I knew it was coming out this year, I really hoped and prayed that was going to be the case. But did I believe that? No. So, I'm pleasantly surprised. And I think it would be a great ending point. If they make more, I'll go see them, because of course I will. You'll probably do the same if you're into the franchise. But Saw X is great. I thought it was anyway. Might not be everybody's favourite, But I think it would be hard pressed to find someone that enjoyed the earlier Saw films when the franchise was really at its best, and they don't see a lot of those moments and a lot of those good points that they had back then replicated here in a different way, but also it feels like the good things back then being replicated here with a new coat of paint. That's how it feels. And that's basically exactly what I wanted. It's not my movie of the year because, it's not, an absolute masterpiece, but for what I wanted it to be, I'd be hard pressed to say I didn't get near enough exactly what I wanted. So Saw X gets a very worthy 8 out of 10. I would really recommend just give it a go if you get a chance. But yeah, that's been my thoughts on Saw X, or Socks. Is anybody calling it that? Socks? You get all these names nowadays with movies, like Fast X, which should have been called Fast 10 Your Seatbelts. Saw X, but if you say it too fast, it sounds like Socks. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for listening to me talking about the movies. If you did enjoy this, leave a like, let me know. Stick around, subscribe for more like this. There'll be a lot of movies coming between now and Christmas. We've got a lot coming even in the next month. A few more horrors, a few more big movie releases. So I'll be here. If you want to stick around, I'd appreciate you so much for it. And if you do, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.